To the curious, the seekers, and the experts, welcome. You're listening to Poli-Psych podcast. The election was Tuesday night, and as we are recording, it is Thursday, November 5th. And today, we know virtually no more as to who will be the next president of the United States than we did last week when we recorded our show before election night. We wanted to consider some of the issues surrounding the election, but more significantly, some of the events and issues that were pertinent leading up to the election. So with me today are Don and Ken. And Ken, will you introduce this topic for us?
Sure. We've been trying to come up with a hashtag for this everywhere. Everyone's been working on this and they come up with a few, but here's one: Deception 2020. And the reason I say that is it does there's some interwoven themes, and I don't like the word, but almost everybody putting together a scenario has to use their intuition, which also translates into conspiracy theory. So you'll see some of that today from me. And overall, I've got a 60% chance that I would bet on for Trump pulling this off. He's pulled off every other intricate plot before, especially looking back at the Mueller investigation and several other issues where he looks like it's all over, and then he comes out smelling like a rose. So what do you think, Don, of all these events?
I am definitely more than 60%, Ken. I'm with you, and I would actually argue that things are going pretty well according to plan, and the Democrats have done what the Trump and Patriot team expected them to do, and even President Trump called it, I think, early on, and he said this is going to go to the courts, and that was before Biden was posturing as if he'd won, which he hasn't actually fully said that. Maybe he has, and anyway, no, I don't think anybody's taking that seriously, the Biden proclamation of victory. And then, of course, President Trump got his tweet removed where he mentioned a big win. But yeah, we're in the midst of a very serious battle. This is probably the biggest election, you can call it a scandal, except for it hasn't been revealed as such, or you could call it fraud, but we haven't proven that it's fraud. But something very serious is going on with our election system, to the point where we have to wonder, what is the ground we're really standing on? And I want to kind of frame this and open up the whole discussion by reading a post that was actually from Q Team, but it's been put on a nice background, and it perfectly fits where we're at now and how I see what's happening. Only when evil is forced into the light can we defeat it. Only when they can no longer operate in the shadows can people see the truth for themselves. Only when people see the truth for themselves will people understand the true nature of their deception. Seeing is believing. Sometimes you can't tell the public the truth. You must show them. Only then will people find the will to change. It had to be this way. This is not another 4-year election. God wins. Q. And that's what I think is happening, is that on social media there is many different angles of exposing all kinds of flavors of voter fraud and election rigging, and we're going to get into that during the show. But I actually think this is a really good thing, because if we're going to paper this whole thing over, meaning the machinations of government and all the corruption, and just sort of go on as usual, then we haven't accomplished anything. But Trump came in to clean the swamp, and now the swamp is actually being exposed for all to see, and I think that's a very good thing.
Cindy didn't mention the time, but it's 4:27, and it's November 5th. It's a Thursday, so things come so fast. at us that it's hard to process. The themes that came up today, that I had heard Lionel, who takes a very pessimistic view, but he had a little sniglet here. He said they stole it fair and square. He was doing material there, but what he meant by that is they intended to do this and sort of did it in plain sight and couched it in legality, just like the Hitler election in 1930 something or other, 33 maybe. And that was an election too. But the backstops, I'll just quickly go through, and then we'll try to get into the deeper thematic. But Dr. Jerome Corsi has a PhD in political science, so he's pretty well versed in these things, and it's a little bit arcane. I won't go into the minutia, but there are some backstops, and there are some time delays involved in all this as well. There's the December 14th deadline, and so the takeaway here is that it won't be resolved quickly in estimation at this point. I'm checking out. I always check Zero Hedge. They print first and verify later, but I'll catch headlines. I don't see anything happening, but there are a number of states that are where there's some brush fires going. But here's the thing that I got from the Dr. Corsi show. His show was recorded about 3 hours ago. Is that while the GOP may be weak in the judicial area in the states, and it starts in the states. This is kind of the level we're on now. It hasn't blown out of that framework yet. While that is definitely chock full of liberal Democrats masquerading as judges, um, the legislatures in, I believe, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, both houses are Republican. And the reason that's important is that they control the electors who go to the Electoral College. So if they can be persuaded by events that a fraud took place, they may impose their own judgment upon the electors and reappoint electors that they know will adhere to the spirit of upholding voter rights, one person, one equal vote, rather than the mess we have now where we just can't. There's so many instances. We shan't discuss each one, but it's pretty obvious there's a lot of things going on that aren't too good. I think the one thing that really hit me was President Trump's. I think he made the speech at 2 a.m. Don was online um, at that point, and we both heard it live. And I kind of missed it at first, but it came out later in an X22 report by Dave. The next day, is that President Trump mentioned he was aware of the 4 a.m. drops.
We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list, okay? It's a very sad moment. To me, this is a very sad moment.
So in that clip, you can see him referring to that. So the reason before I hand off again is there may be a lot of pessimism out there, but it's also possible that they're engaging in essentially entrapment, basically catching the criminal in the process of doing the crime, which is about the only way sometimes you can prove theft in court. You can, once something is stolen from your property, you're not going to get it back just because it was stolen. They stole it and it's gone. That's it. But you have to catch them in the act, and I think that might be happening. That's one backstop. The other backstop is the House of Representatives. Also, the newly elected House, I didn't know this, the newly elected House of Representatives would be the one to adjudicate the election. And I believe that they hold a majority, and I believe, could be wrong, that's one state, one vote. So, that's why I'm sort of 60%, and sometimes that goes up to 70% convinced that President Trump will pull this through. And lastly, we're talking about Rudy Giuliani, and who's General Flynn's attorney's name? What's her name?
Sidney Powell.
Yeah, she's involved. But the one that I'm looking at, and he hasn't been mentioned much, is Jay Sekulow, and he was extremely powerful during the impeachment, and he may rise sort of to the top of prominence as they start to adjudicate the whole process.
I would
Yeah.
just like to mention very briefly, one interesting trend that I think I have picked up on social media, and this is not completely related to our discussion today, but it's related to the results of the election. I have noticed just a hint of people coming together, whether they are Trump supporters or Biden supporters, and there seems to be a sort of agreement. It's mostly unspoken right now, but I'm picking up the vibe. I think that Americans are beginning to agree all together, or mostly not shut down DC and those folks, but most Americans, I believe, are beginning to realize that we have all been, I want to use the word abused, that we have all been taken advantage of, that what is being done is trying to steal our vote, no matter which side we're on. Again, we know, those of us who are older than probably 20 are all aware that having the election this intently contested is not normal. The normal scenario is that we make our chili or our popcorn, we sit down in front of the television on election night, and before we go to bed, we know who has been elected president. And this time has been stolen from us. And I believe that, again, all Americans are aware. We're all stressed out. We're all exhausted. And I think there's an agreement among all of us that this should not have happened, and that I think everybody wants to find out why it did and make sure that it doesn't happen again.
Cindy, I agree with you, and I think there's a post from Joe M. Storm is Upon Us really expressed this well, and I'm going to read it. He says, think about it. What would unite the entire country behind the issue of voter fraud if both sides felt they were victims? It needed to be close so that both sides would blame each other and demand action. Trump is going to win 274. Liberals believe he stole it somehow. Patriots will expose the millions of fraudulent ballots. The truth will be revealed. Trust the plan. So he's saying, just in a slightly different slant, the same thing you are. I think that nobody likes a rigged election. Even if your side wins, you don't want that to be what you're depending on. You don't want that in a supposedly free country. So I think we're headed there, and I think this is the beginning of that. And I'm just looking at a slide on my screen that has some of the percent turnouts, and I'll just rattle them off there just to prove that we are looking at very obvious election fraud. Percent turnout: Nevada 125%, Pennsylvania 109%, Minnesota 107, North Carolina 106, Wisconsin 105, Michigan 105, Arizona 101, Georgia 96%. All obviously votes that should not even be counted. So that's really way over, way out of bounds. That, like Cindy said, we used to, in the past elections, trust that the vote counts were coming in as accurately, but now we have these things that happened. It actually happened in 2016, where he had this pause at 2 a.m. and then they didn't say they're going to stop counting ballots, but it was essentially the same thing. But then Trump did win because the attempt to steal was blocked, and they had to say that Trump won. Well, the attempt to steal was not blocked in 2020 as it was in 2016, and I think that's for a reason. I think that we're going to see what fraud was committed, and it's coming out with these obvious percent turnout greater than 100%. It's just ridiculous. And I'll get into a little bit more detail in a second exactly well, in a more general sense, how that was accomplished and what the battle plan was. I think we all kind of have some inkling of it, but we'll get into a little bit more detail in a second.
Well, we can look at it also from the group or the sociological behavior on both sides, and I've noticed that the people who are Biden supporters or liberals or Democrats, however you want to classify that, and it is pretty easy to spot because we have a very bifurcated electorate. So there are very few people that are, kind of in the middle. There may be some, but they're just not paying attention. So let's just, put them aside for a second, although it is a significant, part of the whole concept of conversion. But they tend to trust the health authorities, and I've got people in my family as well. Nuclear family. What I'm about to say won't apply. Um, and that's a different type of relationship than the sociological. Um, so I think that's their blind spot, is they would definitely trust the health authorities, and I think there's also a blind spot on the right. And the right, I'm going to use the Gospels as an example of Jesus, right before Gethsemane, right after Gethsemane, that you'll deny me 3 times before the cock crows, or I can't quote it exactly right now. I didn't prepare for that, but and of course, I think it was Peter. I forget which disciple, but sure enough, he caved, and I think that's the blind spot. Most red state or Republicans or conservatives follow the law. They'll follow the law. They'll also follow sociological norms, and much more readily. So the only thing I'll say for the leftists that we've studied, and this goes for the Fithian group and all these people, is their beliefs may be sort of demented, but if the ones that are true believers are willing to put their bodies on the line, whether that's a wise move or not, that's another subject. But conservatives are not, and I think overall, I've absorbed personally a lot more abuse from the left and kind of let that go. But I think what will start to happen is people should really start to push back a little bit on the sociological level. Now, that may seem a little antisocial, but this is our blind spot, is we've been perceived as weak. And the pessimistic side of me says that they have stolen it fair and square, and nothing will happen. We may talk like we'll be aware of it, but they know, they've sensed this weakness, and they're exploiting it right now in broad daylight and without the traction of legal process, which hopefully we get. But there's no guarantee of that because they thought this through. They've definitely taken the courts and put that in their back pocket, a lot of the judges and so on. We're seeing that in the Flynn case. We still can't get that dismissed. How long has that been going on? And so Sidney Powell is going to come in and magically solve this. Not her fault, but the system is completely corrupt. And this was the reason Bannon split with President Trump. Steve Bannon was pointing out that he's got no chance of solving this in 1 term or 2 terms, that it would take a 20 to 30 year window. And he may be right.
I'm glad you brought up Steve Bannon because I'm not really a fan, but I think all of us are so desperately trying to find the latest news and avoid watching the mainstream media that we we'll watch things that we typically would not have watched before. So I've been watching Steve Bannon's War Room quite a bit the last couple of days, and yesterday was talking yesterday morning about the duel between Burr and Hamilton, and evidently somebody asked Burr why he was able to shoot Alexander Hamilton, who later died as a result of the duel. And Burr said that Hamilton's hand shook, and Bannon was expressing what you just touched on, Ken. That and I think Bannon even said President Trump's hand cannot shake. He has to, and of course we're speaking metaphorically, but He has to take aim, and he has to be determined. And we've heard from people who have studied warfare that huge numbers of troops, fresh troops, when they go into battle, they will not shoot to kill. They will shoot over the enemy's heads and so on and so forth, because it's not in nice people. And this is exactly what you were saying. Nice people don't want to hurt somebody. Gentlemanly men don't want to destroy somebody, don't want to ruin their reputation, whatever. There's an old quote. I think this was from an old Ohio governor. I can't remember which one, but I remember my brother-in-law saying this years ago. And I'm not a George Bush fan either, but this guy said, George Bush, he's the kind of man that steps out of the shower to take a piss. And that's the kind of how I think a lot of Republicans are characterized that way. That we, like you said, we don't want to put ourselves in physical jeopardy. We don't want to fight. If we are in a duel, our hands are probably going to shake. But metaphorically speaking, once again. But I think you're right. I think we need to get over that. I think Steve Bannon is right that President Trump needs to have a steady hand and take aim and do what needs to be done.
The problem is we don't have a narrative framework, and we've been studying the leaks that came out of the shutdown DC and Lisa Fithian, and the various materials show that they've established a very solid narrative framework that's completely uniform across the board from end to end. And this is the technique they've used to get their followers to essentially become human shields for the leftist string pullers, the people that are trying to hide from crime. I mean, we haven't really gone back to the Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, Jim Biden complex of issues, but that's kind of funny how that we just kind of let that go. But not us, but the news cycle itself, because based on that material, Biden would be impeached on, I don't know, day one. Not to mention the 25th Amendment. So, but okay, the problem, yes, I agree. Donald Trump, great warrior, but where's the narrative framework? Where is the framework that would make people a little more assertive on the sociological level about their belief system and not cower? And I mean, I do the mask thing when I go to the grocery store. I'm not willing to be overly demonstrative, but they are. So I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying, this is the reality of the situation, is that they've sensed weakness and they're exploiting it. And whether they get away with it or not, I don't know. But there's no yet visible. Don will probably pull me off this ledge, but until there's some kind of judicial traction, because that's the function of justice, is you can't just punish somebody for a crime in the dark. It serves it's no constructive purpose. Then it's just revenge. The whole purpose of justice is to publicly demonstrate that this behavior is not right. And when you have a media that's, I think, just prolonging this for advertising revenue, but that's kind of a shot in the dark as well. A media not reporting these stories, and a justice system that's not prosecuting any of these crimes, it's emboldening the left to put their bodies on the line. And if President Trump does pull through this, the plans to wreak havoc across the country will come into full flower, and then we'll be back on that story again.
Well, Ken, I agree with you that I think that there is a psychological hurdle to overcome. I believe that there's two aspects of it. I think we need to realize the way the political world works is not just we elect some representatives and we expect them to do the right thing and carry out everything that needs to happen. We at the grassroots level need to stay engaged and push and insist that things are carried out according to what is right and true and good, real justice at the grassroots level that is sensed by the people. And I believe that that's actually what is beginning to happen now that has been so essential. I saw one tweet, it's actually down at the bottom of my list there, from Candace Owens, who said, why did it take patriots at the grassroots level to insist that that we get justice here in terms of the getting the vote count recognized as being fraudulent and getting changed? I can't remember the specifics right off the top of my head without looking at it again. But one of my favorite people on Twitter, Brian or Dwayne Cates, I think it was Dwayne, he says, this is necessary because we, the people, have to tell our representatives what to do. Otherwise, the Trump administration just gets cast by the enemy media as tyrants and political persecutors. So it's not just political cover to need the people to ask you to do it. It's actually the way government is supposed to work. And we've been basically, the American public, have been asleep at the switch, just putting everything on autopilot, and we haven't been engaged. And that's why things have drifted so far off course. So now, yeah, we have to say, look at this vote fraud. We have to fix this. Now, we can't just rely on the politicians to fix it. Thank God we've got a non-politician at the highest office in the land there to clean up the mess that the politicians created. But he has to be poked and prodded by us, and that's the way it is actually supposed to work.
I wonder where the voter ID is, though, because we had 4 years, and our credit cards. I mean, the technology is definitely there.
Well, it's the need has to be demonstrated to the people. There have been a core group of people that have said, yeah, we need this, but it hasn't been a national outcry to the extent that it's possible to overcome the blowback from the mainstream media that says voter suppression, voter suppression, voter suppression, as soon as you try to do anything that's reasonable in terms of voter ID. So now, once we're getting the dross exposed, this is going into the fiery furnace here where we're going to burn off the impurities, we're going to get this outcry saying we've got to have actual ID in every state. It has to be something that we know is real and we can count on. And it hasn't been to that extent yet, and that's the big part of the push. Not only do we need a few people saying representatives do this, we need it across the board.
Yeah, I'd say that works, but the problem is then you have the pandemic issue as well. How would voter ID have interacted with the pandemic?
Well, yeah, I want to get into that definitely, because that I think is the big elephant in the room here. And I've got one graphic that I'm looking at that I posted in my queue here, and it's the one that has the American the stars on the map and in the different states, and it's a graphic that shows the alignment, the essential agreement between the COVID-19 policy trackers states and the masks and all of the mandates that said, okay, you've got to have all of these COVID tracking in place. And those states are also the ones that are having these mail-in ballots coming in late, flipping the states for Biden. And it's a direct relationship. It's just so obvious. It was hidden in plain view. And many people see it. Many people knew exactly that was what was happening. The states that did the unrequested mail-out ballots that you can bring the totals up to over 100% with, those are the states that had the full COVID-19 tracking in place so that they could pull off this election fraud. That's how long ago it was planned, and they needed to keep the scare going so that they could do this election fraud. Again, this was all foreseen by the people that were on the other side, that were on President Trump's side. They knew they were going to try this. So I believe they were ready for it. And that's another big reason why I believe it's all according to plan. Now the American public can see it. Now the American public can see, wait a minute, we've lost control of the actual mechanisms of vote counting. We need actual court cases with discovery involved so that we can find out what these people are doing behind closed doors, and how these votes are getting brought in the truckload when they're needed to flip the state from one party to the other. And we want to know how this stuff works. And these court cases with discovery is going to make all this information come out into the light. Now, how soon that will happen, that will be a long process. But the outcry to kick it off has started, and that's the good thing. Now, I don't think it's going to take that long to determine who our president is. I believe that there'll be relatively quick action there. I believe we're going to make the middle of December deadline, and we may even know by the end of this week, more like maybe the middle or end of next week. I think it'll be essential agreement, because there will be litigation involved. There'll be pressure to bear, from in a legal sense, put on those that are committing the fraud. They know who they are, and they will be made to back off. So I think this is all good. But yeah, how they are doing it is through that COVID-19 mail-in ballot fraud.
That was pretty well thought out then. It looks like that would have to go back into maybe not the origin of the virus, but the overreaction, the second wave that seems to have been, or just the extension of it, basically, because we had 15 days to stop the spread, and that was how many? I don't know. I can't even remember. It was more than 6 months ago. Um, so it looks like at this point, another way to look at this is that this is basically a crime of desperation, which is the antithesis of what it's appearing to be, which sometimes is the reality of a situation when there's a histrionic response from a group or an individual. And they may have sort of revealed that desperation in the execution of this plan, the fact that it's so obvious. And the states, I put a map up, and it'll probably hopefully we can put it in the show. It's it was a status at about 4:50 p.m. on November 5th. But the point I wanted to make is that we have Joe Biden with 253 electoral votes and President Trump with 214. The overall effect of that would be to encourage the blue state viewer, and they've done this. We were watching the whole thing on election night, and they would call states. I think they definitely wanted to, at a certain point, keep Biden in the lead at all times. And the strategy they used
Definitely.
to call states was to maintain that, and it's still going, because some of these blue states, I call them stripies. Some of those states are now being called into serious question. I won't get into the weeds on that, but that's the point, is that if I remember Bush v. Gore, just a quick side note, it was the first day we got cable television. It was the 2000 election, I think it was. And like Cindy said, we thought it would be all over that night. We had the TV going, and that went on forever. That was again, it made it to the Supreme Court as well, and there was a lot of back and forth. And it doesn't this differs substantially in the scope, but in essence it's kind of the same deal as the validity of elections. And here we are, 20 years later, we still haven't solved the problem, but whatever. Hanging chads. In the age of digital, instantaneous transmission of tweets, we can't solve the vote thing somehow, but whatever. The effort may be not as overt. That's what I'm getting at, is they may have realized they can't put Biden in, and nobody wants I pronounce her name on purpose incorrectly, so I'll have to stop that. But Kamala, is that the way? Well, whatever.
Yeah,
So
Kamala.
they may be going appearing to go to win, and they may win. It's a possibility, but I think what they're really trying to do is just delegitimize the Trump administration. And but it's a move of desperation. Again, it's there's certain aspects of it that are just so obvious. They're in these states, and I encourage people to go to the link for this. What's it called? Decision Desk, and just look at the vote spread in Nevada. I think it's about 8,000 people. I don't know. Maybe it's updated. It updates every in real time. It updates very closely. So 604,000 versus 592,000. That would be like 12,000 people. In a state with a lot more people than that. Minnesota's spread. Oh, look at that's. I don't know where they came up with those. No, Wisconsin. I'm sorry, Wisconsin. Go ahead and try this at home, people. 20,000 people. I mean, that's pretty fine tuned. Some of the other ones that they're saying are not sure for Trump have much wider spreads, where Donald Trump has a significant majority. North Carolina. So when you look at that map, I think the media is definitely trying to drag this out, because if I was an executive or whatever there, this would be a gold mine to keep people glued to the television for a month. What possible that's a motive in and of itself, besides the fact that they might be politically biased, but I don't know if it's completely political at this point. The big tech stuff, different story. I think they feel a little bit of bad karma from 2016, and now they're kind of going way over in the other direction and trying to actually manipulate the election in the other direction to make up for the open platform that they. I mean, back then it was like a Disneyland. It was great. There was very little. There might have been a little bit of shadow banning going on, but it didn't achieve the technical superiority that it achieved through the new knowledge era that followed, because they were caught by surprise. But that's about all I've got. I see it as um, extreme, to give them credit, evil, for the evil brilliance of this plan. They have a narrative framework, and they've also taken operational initiative, and I haven't seen it yet, although hopefully the other shoe drops at some point and saves the republic, because if not, I would say we're pretty much done as a country.
Yeah, this is it really is hanging in the balance. And one of the things I like that I noticed that Dave of X22 has said in his last broadcast or two, that this is a rebirth of a republic, and we really are going down to the bare bedrock here and saying, what are we based on here? What's really the foundation that we're trying to build on? And it is trying to testing the metal of what we're made of as a nation to go through this process. I think it's essential, but I do think that it is also the next step after what you just described, Ken, where the Democrats have created this blatant fraud that those of us that are paying attention can see. Well, they like President Trump, think a few steps down the road. Now, I think President Trump is thinking a few steps farther, but the next step that the Democrats are definitely planning on is anticipating that he is going to have to take strong action against their fraud. So while the Patriots may say, hey, we trapped you, you've fallen into the trap, the Democrats are saying, and what are you going to do about it? Because as soon as you do anything about it, we're going to call you a dictator, and we've got all of our people that are in the media that are going to echo that line, and America is going to hate the man that made elections so tainted. Now, of course, this is not going to work. They've tried the same thing with the economy. They're trying to blame the shutdown on Trump when actually it's the Democrat policies and the Democrat governors and their states that have caused the economic problems that have to do with the COVID-19 lockdown. But they're going to do the same thing with once President Trump and his legal team begins to take action against this vote fraud and expose it. Yeah, it's going to draw people together, but it's also going to give a platform to those that are going to say, we've got a tyrant who won't leave the White House. Of course, they've seeded that narrative over a long period of time. They've said that that's going to happen, and that's what shutdown DC is prepared for. So that is the next shoe to drop. I think that we have to educate our friends and neighbors, make the American public aware of what's really going on, that this is about rule of law, this is about free and fair elections, and expose the cheating. And it has to be done at the grassroots level. Otherwise, the Trump is a dictator narrative is going to get some traction. But if we manage it and push it at the grassroots level, that's not going to happen.
One thing that and I think this is probably my last thought that I need to express, that I want to express. Hindsight is 20/20. We all know that, but I feel quite naive about how I came into this election and the optimism that I felt, and because of 2016. I knew that there would be opposition. I just assumed that everything would be taken care of election night, and then it would be like 2016, and President Trump would win, and we'd all go to bed happy. Well, most of us would go to bed happy. I completely ignored a lot of evidence that pointed to something else happening. And this ties into our critical race theory series that we did last week, that we completed last week, and the information about the Transition Integrity Project and shut down DC, and most of these people who are opposing the expressed will of the people in voting incorporated in their possible scenarios a narrow Trump win. And I think TIP may have had something that was a little more expansive than that, but their focus has been that they anticipated a narrow Trump win at most. That they were anticipating, they war gamed. What if Biden barely wins? What if Trump barely wins? What if Biden wins in a landslide? I should have realized from reading all that and absorbing all that information, listening to those videos, that they already knew, those people who war gamed those scenarios and made those plans, they seem to already have known and been persuaded that election night would not give a very clear result. And I regret that I did not accept that evidence, because I was kind of broadsided, and I wouldn't need to have been, because as one of you said, they told us exactly what they were going to do, and I should have known, and I regret that I didn't.
Yeah, one of the things that I want to mention also to give us hope that this thing is going to be pulled out and there is a plan behind it. Now, I want to mention this because I believe it is getting a lot of traction in the alternative media. I haven't seen it proven yet, but I consider it credible enough that I'm going to mention it here. And that's this whole idea of an invisible seal on the actual election ballots that were used at the polls, or in the mail-out voting that were authorized. And there is this rumor that is going around about that, and I'm looking at a meme here, a screenshot. What if the official 2020 election ballots were stamped with an invisible seal? And it shows a difference between black ink and corn ink, and how the ink that is ethanol-based, corn, is can be used to make an invisible impression that can only be seen with the night vision and military inspecting equipment to use infrared to view the ballots. And they're saying that that's why some of these ballot counting places are boarding over the windows, so that they can use the infrared vision and turn off the lights. Don't know for sure that that's going on, but because I think there's such strong evidence that this type of fraud was anticipated, that there would have been countermeasures in place to block it. So I consider it more than likely that something like this is possible, that there is a invisible ink type of ballot marking system to detect the fraudulent ballots.
To the curious, the seekers, and the experts, thank you for joining us for this episode of Poli-Psych Podcast. We hope that you have enjoyed this episode. If you have, we ask that you please click like, subscribe to us on YouTube, subscribe to us on BitChute, and if you never want to miss a show, you might want to ask YouTube to notify you when we have created a new show. We typically put one out about once a week, usually on Saturday morning. Also, please follow us on Twitter, and if you have a moment, we invite you to visit our website. Once again, thanks for joining us, and until next time, take care.